Hello, everyone. I'm Michelle LEDUC CATLIN, and I am here today at Lux Media because there is a story that needs to be told by a very courageous woman who is here to expose a lot of corruption. This is not the sort of thing I normally do, but I know that you know that the people at Lux Media have a very high level of integrity and a very large commitment to telling the truth of what's happening in the world and what's happening in Canada. And today, I'm here to conduct this interview in English because both Lux Media and my guest are committed to spreading this information across the country. So I'm going to introduce you to Sue SPROULE. Hello, Sue.
Hello, Michelle. Thank you for having me, and thank you very, very much to Lux Media to having us here today.
Well, thank you so much. I want to get right into this. I want you to start by telling us your background. I know I will just as a very brief introduction, say that you started in the airline industry, and we're going to be talking about the airline industry, among other things, in 1985.
Yes.
So just give the audience a little bit of a background.
I was in college. I applied for a summer job, and I started in 1985. And throughout my college years, I stayed part-time in the airline industry. And once I was in university, I was not finished my education. They offered me to go up Canadian North. I was with Canadian Airlines at the time, to take a posting in Iqaluit in 1993. And I was up there a couple of years, and that's why I didn't finish my education. But when I came back, I became full-time employee. I had worked at the airport, I had worked for Canadian Cargo, and now I was transferred in 1995 at the call center of Canadian Airlines. And then came the merge in 2000 with Air Canada. We became Air Canada, and I was with them since and until my final termination on the 28th of November 2018 with an arbitration with Mr. Brian Keller, Unifor, and Air Canada.
Okay. Now, you were also a health and safety representative, which is a very important piece to this story.
Exactly.
Okay. So let's start at the call center. That call center in Montreal,
yes,
correct?
Yes, the Montreal call center.
You had, within the span of a few months, 3 evacuations.
Exactly. From August 2011 to the 8th of February 2012, we had 3 evacuations for different things, generators not working, a power outage due to a storm at the tail of a hurricane, and things like that. And we did not have an evacuation plan as required by the federal law, Health and Safety, Part 3 of the Canadian Labour Code.
Okay, I just want to pause there. So Air Canada, a national company, had no health and safety, had no evacuation plan
for the call center.
For the call center, which was a big call center. You had several hundred employees.
Yeah, we were between 200 and 300 at the time. Now we're over 400.
Okay.
At the time, we're probably in the areas of 250 to 275, and required by law, because we're ruled by the federal labor law, we needed an evacuation plan for workplaces that have more than 50 people on staff. And we did not have one from 2009 till I wrote the evacuation plan for the Montreal call center in May 2012.
Okay. Now, this last evacuation, you said that there was an issue with carbon monoxide.
Yes.
That was actually being ventilated through the HVAC system.
Yes. They should have, that day was a Saturday, the 8th of February. There was some work being done in the garage, the underground garage, and technically they should have ventilated the place and kept the doors of the garages open to make sure the carbon monoxide would not seep in through the HVAC. And we had received a memo that they were going to have this work done in the basement during the weekend, but it wasn't supposed to affect our operation at the call center, but it did. It ended up that when they finished their work, I was 20 minutes away from the end of my shift. I was working at the help desk because I was also a help desk agent, because the Montreal call center has the meta desk, the operations, the training department, and the help desk and regular reservations, because we're a bilingual call center. And a training agent came to me and said, look, we have some agents that went and opened this door there to go down for their break, and there's this really strong smell. So I told them, just a second, I finished my call, I closed my line, It was maybe not even 20 steps away from my desk. I just went, I opened the door, I got this smell that just came like there was no smoke or anything, but you could smell that there was something wrong. My instincts just popped in. I turned around, I called a colleague, Mark. I said, you block this door, and I pulled the alarm, and I evacuated, and I said, we're evacuating. I just evacuated. I knew I needed to do something because that's what I've been trained to do, but I really wasn't thinking of any ramifications other than doing my job as the health and safety. But we did not have an evacuation plan. So now the operations person that was there, Rachel, she comes to me, what do we do? What do we do? So I said, look, print the roster to make sure we have everybody accounted for and make sure we have also the new hires that are in the class. And we need to leave. And she said, I send them to the parking lot. You know, if we had a plan, that's where we would have sent them. So I managed all that, and there's no management that came to the call center that day on the 8th of February for several hours, I think like 4 or 5 hours. And when the director, Mario Di Rienzo, showed up, he started giving me crap so much that he was like,
what for? Why was he giving you crap? You got these people out safely, yes?
Because the call center was closed, and I had ruined his Valentine's supper because we were the 8th of February. He was out with his mistress that night, not his wife. So I found out that after. It's just an anecdote to make you laugh, but it was really not funny. And I was already in conflict with this director. He didn't like me one bit. He was already on my back for over a year, and he would try to find me in the wrongdoing. But I was a good agent. I was good at my job. I loved my colleagues. I loved what I did.
And you told me that when we were speaking before the interview, you told me that you actually often were selected for awards.
Yeah, the 8th of February, that's exactly what I told you. Thank you. I found out that year of 2012 that I had received a record amount of nominations for act of bravery for the 8th of February evacuation and for Award of Excellence from my colleagues. To me, that was amazing to find that out later, found out like a year later. But at the time when all this happened, I couldn't understand why they did this, you know, because...
You couldn't understand why they did what?
They were so upset with me for doing my job.
Yeah. And what did you conclude?
I think they're just career bullies, and that being a good agent and being respected by my colleagues made me a target to these professional career bullies.
Okay, so let's talk a bit about that, because it seems to me, why would you bully your best employees, right? So there's something else.
I think I made them look bad because I did all the reports that they should have been the ones making, and I had been doing that for over 20 years. But my previous supervisors or directors always appreciated my job, would review what I had done, put a signature, not even modify much of my reports, and send it off to the headquarters of Air Canada.
So in this case, what you did is you pointed out that, first of all, they were operating illegally.
They were operating without having a proper evacuation plan in place. We didn't have any phone numbers for any of the managers to call them in case of emergency. I happened to have found the number on my cell phone, and somebody else gave me a phone number of another manager.
Okay, and because of you, everybody got out safely.
Yes.
Right? Now, you did say that there was one woman who was pregnant.
Yeah, she went to the hospital by ambulance because she was nauseous and everything, and she knew she was pregnant, and then we found out it was carbon monoxide. And
you called the ambulance?
Yeah, I called the ambulance. She went to the hospital by ambulance, and I spoke with her a few days later, and she was in training. She was a new hire, and she decided she didn't want to work for Air Canada. That experience she had during training was enough for her to say, this is not something I want to do. So there's a few people that were in training that day that decided not to come back.
So you were the health and safety rep, you were the person who got everybody out of the building, you were the person obviously responsible in that environment on that day, right? And yet, you said you were excluded from the post-mortem.
Yeah, on the Monday, because that happened on the Saturday, the 8th. So on the Monday would have been the 10th. I was not on schedule, on shift, but as a health and safety rep, I should have been demanded to come to work, to do the post-mortem, to figure out what's the good, what's the bad. And instead, it was Benoit Lapointe and Ted Massa, our union reps for CAW at the time, that now is Unifor, that went, and they didn't have any clue at what happened other than the emails of the information I provided to them that had what happened that day. And that was kind of bizarre as well, but I said, okay, they want to handle it. So they did the postmortem, apparently, with the management, local management. And when I came in on the Tuesday, it was just another regular day for me. And but I felt that there was something going on. The union wasn't really taking this matter seriously. We didn't have the amount of people that should have been trained as first aiders to be available on shift in the call center at any time, because we had a lot of movement in that year, new hires, people transferring elsewhere, but it's still a federal regulation. You need to have people trained as first aiders.
So you're saying not only was Air Canada negligent, but the union?
Very much so. I blame the union 100% on this, because they're the gatekeepers. They're the ones who are supposed to be the buffer in between the corporation if they are not attending to their duties, and to protect the employees if there's a danger to their moral or physical integrity. And I had to put in the HR complaint directly because they weren't doing it. They didn't even put in a grievance for this. And that was their responsibility, Ted Massa and Benoit Lapointe at the time. And Leslie Diaz was our CAW president at the time. That's Jerry Diaz's wife. He was also president of another union on the auto workers sector, and they actually are the ones, while both presidents of their own distinct unions, merged together in 2013 and became Unifor, the big criminal organization called Unifor.
Okay, so you're saying that there's a husband and wife who both headed up powerful unions.
Yes, ma'am.
And merged.
Yes.
To become Unifor.
Yes. With no consensus or membership voting. They did this, created Unifor. And one day, CAW didn't exist. We were all Unifor members.
Okay. Let's go back. I want to talk about the atmosphere at Air Canada. So we've got kind of two stories, right? We've got the corruption of Air Canada, we've got the corruption of Unifor, formerly CAW, and I can't remember what the other union was. But the atmosphere at Air Canada, you spoke of consistent bullying.
We had sexual harassment. I'll give you an example. There was a gentleman called Tony Santos. He was a senior manager at the Air Canada call center. He had over 30 years, I think in the areas of 35 years. His obsession was with women with big breasts. There's a colleague of mine, she's still working, an amazing woman, very modest, kind woman. She came to me and she told me this was happening to her. She went to the union on her own and they laughed at her. So she took upon herself to tape record with a recording device, Tony Santos, for multiple visits in his office. And then she took that recording to the union, and they said, you either do something about it or I get a lawyer. Believe it or not, within a week, I didn't know it was because of this, my friend. I don't want to name her because she's not retired yet. They didn't know that she had done this, but she did it anyways, and nobody in the call center knew it was because of this lady, that he just disappeared. From one week to another, he disappeared. He was taking his pension. He was retiring. He moved to Portugal. Boop.
So she had evidence.
Yeah, she had major evidence of sexual harassment against Tony Santos.
And she took it to her union.
And now she gave them a recording of what she had recorded in his office.
But instead of a case against him,
yeah,
he was just retired and gone.
Exactly.
Okay. What happened with you?
What happened with me, I had a problem with Bernard Milbert and Mario Zirienzo. Bernard Milbert was also a senior manager of the Air Canada call center, a career bully, like his friend Mario Zirienzo, that was the director of the call center. And these two gentlemen were really awful. I could go on and on about it, but...
Well, let's because bullying and sexual harassment are obviously big accusations.
Yes.
Right? So if you were to summarize or highlight maybe one of the worst incidents, what could you tell us?
Mario Di Rienzo slept with at least 5 women in my call center. And that was, he even...
And how did you find this out?
He bragged about it to male colleagues. In the world of the call center, it's mainly women, but there are some guys working in the call center too. And he would brag about it, that he could get any women like that in the call center he wanted to put his eyes on. And that statement, that person, that male colleague, was asked during my external investigation that came upon my HR complaint in 2012, he actually told the investigator of Cashil's Consulting that Mario Di Rienzo had bragged to him in front of other male colleagues of sleeping with female colleagues. And at the time of my investigation, he had a mistress that he's now today living with. He left his wife for this one.
Okay.
But I don't know, it's his personal life, it's his business.
Right.
But if you're doing this all your career and you're in a professional environment like Air Canada, this is a big no-no. You don't do that.
So go back, because you talked about your investigation. So this was in 2012. This is a result of the evacuation?
Yes.
Okay, so
on the 8th of February, when I saw that things were not jiving, they weren't doing anything, and they weren't even putting in place. They could have called the Labor Department. They could have used the Building Management Department of Air Canada. They could have contacted an outside consulting firm to get an evacuation plan put in place right away. They had neglected it since August 2009. Now we're in 2012. No, they were not putting anything in place. They weren't conducting any training for more first aiders. So I was going to the union and say, what's happening? What happens if we get another evacuation? I said, I know it's rare, but we already had 3 in the last 6 months. What if another one happens and I'm not on shift to take responsibility? Because the only reason I was able to do that is because my union had trained me over 22 years as a health and safety rep. I was being groomed by my own director, Ian Benny from Toronto, to become a national health and safety trainer. I had even won a scholarship to go on a course in the spring of 2012.
So you launched an investigation.
I made a formal complaint to HR because my union wasn't doing it. I felt I had to do it.
Okay. And what was the result of that?
They consulted an investigation with Cashil's Consulting. They talked to 80 colleagues of mine in the call center. There was a conclusion letter and the actual investigation report sent to Air Canada, dated the 26th of July, 2012. But they did nothing about it. They hid it. I had now left the call center on an injury of harassment. That was my complaint to the CNESST. That's the equivalent in Quebec to the WCB for the rest of Canada that doesn't know how things work in Quebec. And at first they had denied my claim because I said I was being harassed and I was in a toxic work environment. But I had no proof of it. But in July, they knew. They had the investigation.
So that investigation that was launched as a result of your complaint about the lack of an evacuation plan actually contained evidence that you were being harassed?
Yes.
Okay.
80 people were investigated, interrogated by this investigator that was mandated by Air Canada headquarters to come into the call center. She spoke with 80 of my colleagues, managers, union reps, everything. And the letter of conclusion that I got a copy of in November of 2012, not the actual investigative report, just the letter, I know it by heart by now. It's the paragraph. It said, due to the preponderance of the evidence, Mrs. Sproule was subject to workplace harassment, workplace conflict, and a poison work environment. When I got that letter, I thought my prayers were answered, that I would be stopped being harassed, I would be able to go back to work and I'd have peace and quiet and things would fall back into place. I really thought.
But that didn't happen.
No.
What did happen?
They hid that for the longest time possible. Leslie Diaz, Jerry Diaz's wife, that was the president of CAW in 2012, I have an email saying, Sue, don't worry, Monday, that would have been the 8th of August, I'm filing a grievance. This is nonsense. They should be contacting you and something should be done about it. I found out in 2017 there was no grievance ever filed by Leslie Diaz, by Benoit Lapointe, or by Ted Massa. That were the people in place for CAW at the time. The only grievance that got filed was in 2016, March of 2016, because they cut me off my insurance. You're not allowed to cut off somebody's insurance, health insurance, prior to being terminated. And I was still on the payroll. I was still an employee of Air Canada until the 28th of November 2018. But they cut off my insurance, and the union didn't do anything about that either. Then I went to the office to drop off receipts to the insurance because they had denied my claim, so I had to go drop them off to the union, to Benoit Lapointe, who was going to ask for a review and get my things in. I was asked by another manager called Dimitri, he's no longer there. He says, I need to talk to you. And I said, yes, and I didn't want to talk to anybody with no witnesses at that point. I was scared of everybody, and I didn't know, but I...
Hold on a second. You said you were scared of everybody. So at this point, why were you afraid? Had you been subjected to harassment? Like, what was happening that you would be afraid?
I got spat in the face by Mario Disrienzo and screamed at in such a manner that my defense mechanism, I froze. I didn't do anything. And I actually, with time, I think he did that on purpose, searching for a reaction from me, that I would have maybe been violent with him or retaliated or something. And I didn't. He was right in my face when all this happened, and I just froze.
And why? What was his justification, his reasoning?
I don't know. It's a question for him. I still don't know why he was this.
So you're talking about a lot of systemic problems both within Air Canada and the union. Why would a union target, harass somebody who is trying to make the place more safe?
That was always my question. I didn't even understand. Actually, Benoit Lapointe, Leslie, and Kate Moss, she's somebody that was also in the union. She was the human rights advocate for CAW. They all told me that I was in a unique, a complicated case, that they had never had a case like that. And at that time, they were lying to me because there was 24 external investigations already taking place or had taken place between 2010 and 2012. That I found out by testifying in a colleague's case at the Human Rights Commission.
24 investigations into what?
Into harassment.
So this was already, there was a culture of harassment.
Yes, but they hid that. The union hid that. I even went to a national conference as the delegate in 2011 or early 2012, and we had workshops about workplace harassment, about all kinds of stuff, and there was no mention of these issues happening currently with the union. And they were telling me to my face that I was in a unique and complex situation. I didn't understand. Unique, yeah, but complex, there was nothing complex about it. They were being bad managers, and my union wasn't doing their job to make sure this was not happening to me or to my colleagues. And they were doing nothing about it. They were telling me, Sue, you're too sensitive. I got that from Ted Massa. They didn't even want to replace the manager from on the committee. They wanted me to quit my position. I said, look, I'm not going to quit my position when in 6 months we're going to have elections. I just won't put my name in, and you can find somebody else to do the job as the health and safety rep. I've had enough now.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm just going to reiterate some of the things you've said because they're quite shocking. So you're talking about numerous investigations, and these 24 other investigations, were those just within the call center?
I don't know the exact places,
okay,
but I know they've happened across, at the time, CAW. I know they had all been mandated for employees that were unionized with CAW and HR of Air Canada. Some of them were in Toronto, some of them were in Winnipeg, Calgary, Vancouver. I know about a girl, Billy, in Vancouver. They destroyed her life. She reached out to me after and she told me her story. And her too, she was a great employee, loyal employee, a health and safety rep and everything. They had the call center in Vancouver was above a hangar for Air Canada. And so the seeping of the fumes coming from the garage from the mechanical stuff, she's the one who had done similar to me, but in Vancouver, and she went through the same hell.
Okay. Ultimately, so you had launched an investigation. The unions said, oh, yes, we'll take care of this. We'll file a grievance. They never did. What ended up happening with you in your employment situation?
The union wanted me to go apply and go on the insurance for depression or burnout or whatever, because I was really tired. And also I was carrying an injury. I fell off the stepladder on the 14th of December 2010, and I was doing physiotherapy. But I had not left work. I was just going to appointments of physiotherapy. So I was already tired, and because of that pain, it's called the syndrome pyramidal. It's nervous pain in the butt cheek area on my left side because I fell all my weight on it. And I still suffer from that today, and I take medication for that. But to me, it was, I don't know why, I don't know if it was triggered because of that, because I made a complaint for that, and because I was tired, not sleeping, it was affecting me, and I was depressed, I was crying all the time, I was in pain, I was being bullied, and it was really, really affecting my mental state. And so at one point I said, I can't do this anymore. And I happened to have an appointment with my doctor for a checkup and to see if everything was going well for my injury from falling off the stepladder. And I just started crying in his office, and I told him what was been happening and everything. He says, why didn't you tell me this before? And he wrote me off and took me off work right away. So the union said, then go on the insurance. I said, I'm not going to do a claim to the insurance. The insurance is when you have personal issues. This is not a personal issue. This is a company issue. I have pain issues because I fell off the stepladder
at work,
and now I'm being harassed on top of it at work. So why should I go on the insurance? So I never made a claim to the insurance. I made a claim to the CNESST, that's the WCB in Quebec, and that's when I got denied for that claim. They were paying for my physiotherapy, but they didn't want to take me upon for the harassment. And it's only in November 2012, with a little bit of pressure, I guess, from Leslie and Benoit Lapointe to the company, that they finally sent me FedEx that conclusion letter. And it was such a cheap copy too. They made it like a cheap photocopy, not even on a nice paperhead. Normally Air Canada sends professional, and it was like put in the mail, and I got that through FedEx. But that's the paper that made it possible for me to get covered by the CNESST. November, December 2012, they reviewed based on that letter that said I had been harassed. There was a conclusion letter. So now it's on the CSST. They retroactively paid me back to June 2012. But then they started asking me to go for evaluations. So instead of bringing me into the office, having a conversation, saying, look, we're sorry what happened to you and everything, they treated me like I was a piece of garbage to them. I was treated horribly. The first meeting we go there, we were supposed to talk about bringing you back to work, things like that. And no, they said, no, stay off work, take the time you need, and we'll talk again in the following months. Everything's okay.
And what ultimately happened?
They sent me to psychiatric evaluation. And they were sending me for psychiatric evaluations every 3 to 4 months until the 2018, 8th of March 2018, I think, is my last psychiatric evaluation I had with a doctor called Marc-André Laliberté from neuroscience. He was
but I want to get back to, ultimately, I want to get to the point where your pension disappeared. I mean, because really the story is, you were doing your job, and it sounds like you were doing it with excellence, right? According to your colleagues, according to this investigation, and instead of being rewarded or even acknowledged, you were systematically pushed out.
Yes.
Now, you did have a physical injury, and you did have a lot of stress because of this constant harassment.
Exactly.
And instead of and although the investigation concluded in your favor,
yes,
you were pushed out. Now, I want to get to the part about your pension. So,
okay,
I was there.
Okay, I'll try to put during the time of the end of 2012 till I finally went to the Tribunal Administratif du Travail. That's a legal process with the CNESST, the equivalent of WCB, where I got a judgment. I finally ended up in front of a judge. But even when I got that in front of the judge, I had a big lawyer firm that hired Henderson Gosling and Lucie Guimont that was there. And she lied too at the tribunal. She said that I already had mental and problems because they got access to my medical file. I gave them access to the medical file to show good faith and everything. Mm-hmm. I let them have access to my entire medical file up until 2000. They wanted more.
Okay.
And when they got that, they would use whatever they want. Because I was put on Cymbalta in 2011 for my injury, she blacked out, the lawyer blacked out the paper she presented to court where it said to help Madame SPROULE that's working full-time and is having problem with chronic pain, and she's getting depressed because she's not sleeping and she works full-time. They blocked that out. She just put, look, she was given Cymbalta in 2011, so she already had a mental problem. If not, she wouldn't be on this medication. So that was their first lie. And my union representative and the paralegal, Yves Cote, that was there representing me for the union CAW, they didn't even contest it. Then they had this doctor, Marc-André Laliberté, that comes on to the stand, and he says, my mom's bipolar. I have personal and family history of mental illness. That was completely a lie. He even went to...
So what was the conclusion?
The conclusion that the tribunal said that she agreed that I was mismanaged and I had been away from work for a long time, so they had to take me back at work with medical conditions and, like a return to work program with my doctors and the CNSST and the company, something that's totally normal. I had been away from work for almost 5 years at that time. They decide to ignore that. But what I didn't know...
Who ignored it?
The company.
Okay.
The company had a judgment that they had to take me back to work, give me a return to work appropriate with my condition and whatever. Mm-hmm. And they didn't want to put that in place. They wanted me to leave. They started offering me, and right after this came out in 2017, this tribunal judgment from the CNSST came out around March 2017. They didn't even contact me right away. They ignored that judgment too until the union started maybe in April. And then they come back, oh, Sue, they don't want you to come back and everything. They want to offer you a one-year salary. So he was like, Benoit Lapointe and Leslie became like brokers of the company to try to convince me to leave, even trying to manipulate me and say, your mom is sick, you could use this money in this time, you've been without salary, and you can start your life again and whatever. I was mid-40s, late 40s, and I said, I have no intention of quitting my job and working what I've been doing all my life that I love until at least 55. That was my plan with my husband at the time. And they ignored it. So they started offering me 1 year, then 2 years, then 3 years in August 2017. Still not wanting to put in place what the judgment said.
And what happened?
The last time when they offered me 3 years, August 2017, they sent me an email, the union, at 9:30 at night, a Tuesday night, saying, Sue, look, the company really, really would like to make you this offer. It's very generous. It's very kind of them. Consider it and blah, 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 and look at it. I open my laptop at 9:30 at night. I look at that and I see they still want me to leave. And now they wanted me to sign a non-disclosure agreement to have my pension, to leave, but they were offering me 3-year salary. It took me 4 minutes. The time I opened the laptop to answer, and I said, I want the tribunal judgment put in place like my doctor said, like the judgment says, and like any normal human being is expected to be treated with dignity and respect. Why is this not being done? Took them 2 days. They sent me through FedEx that I was fired. And that's the letter I posted on a public group of employees of Air Canada for CAW.
So they fired you because you refused their agreement, you refused to leave, and you refused. Did you sign the NDA?
Oh, no. I said I would never sign a non-disclosure agreement to cover up corruption. And I told them, too, I said, do you realize that non-disclosures in the federal legal system is not meant to be used against victims or meant to silence victims? It's meant to protect business secrets. This is not a business secret. This is actually a business crime. And you want me to be silenced and to take money and to leave when all I want to do is go back to work and do my job that I've been doing all my life and that I love? I will never accept that. So they knew there was going to be something. So they had made preparation to go in arbitration the 1st and 2nd of November of 2017. But the union, Benoit Lapointe, was always calling me and sending, are you sure you want to do this? You're sure? You're sure?
So since that time, you've actually had other people reach out to you.
Yes.
Who had also been asked to sign non-disclosure agreements.
And all the ones who did reach out to me had signed non-disclosure agreements, had agreed to remain silent. But they still told me their stories. They still showed me their legal papers, their communication with the company, their communication with the union. They asked me to please to never mention their names because they don't want to jeopardize their settlement with the company. And there's one victim, her name is Kim, and I want to do again another shout out to Kim. I love you and I appreciate you for being there for me. As much as I know that I helped you, you've helped me stay this strong. Thank you, Kim. And what Kim did, she was the one, she's a smart woman. She was in Toronto, ramp agent, lead agent on top of it, training others on the ramp, and she put in a complaint, similar harassment. And they were saying to her, because she was injured from her work on the ramp in Toronto, they had no job for her. And they put her out, discarded her like garbage at the end of 2013. And when I put my letter on the Facebook group for the internal employees saying they're firing me while I'm awaiting an arbitration, she contacted me through Messenger and she warned me of what was going on. And she's the one who informed me that she made a demand of access to information, and she got the numbers of 467 victims of harassment for Air Canada had put in complaints to the Canadian Human Rights Commission.
Okay. So this woman, in a similar situation to you, pushed out. She did an access to information request, 467 victims of harassment.
Yeah, she made a first request at the access to information, and she got a response back that Air Canada had like 2,000 or 3,000 complaints, but it was really vague. It just said complaints. So she redid her access to information, and she asked specifically for harassment, and that's where that 467 numbers. It's that access to information that Kim did that gave us 467, dated the 31st of December 2016. And why I insist for that access of information of the 31st of December 2016 is that this is still ongoing. This is still happening. There's still people putting out the door, being harassed and bullied and silenced with non-disclosure agreements and losing everything, their career, their pensions, their money, if they don't adhere to this. So the number's most likely very much higher. It's just that we didn't redo another access to information. I'm waiting to redo another one to present as a proof when I do get my day in court or at the commission. But now with everything that happened during COVID, the backlog at the Canadian Human Rights Commission is probably closer to 8 to 10 years. So I'll probably be in my 60s or 70s before I get in front of a commission.
And in 2015, you stopped receiving any revenue.
Yeah, 14th of September 2015, the CNSST stopped paying me because they sent me to be evaluated again to try to prepare me to send me back to work. And that evaluation, they took me off a rehab that they had finally put into me because I had been home doing sweet nothing, not to use any curse words here. And so they could not expect me to go now, after all these years, to go back full time when I had been home doing nothing. And I was also a little bit agoraphobic by that time. I had developed other symptoms, and I found out I had some form of PTSD. That's the tag they gave to me. Because of all of this? All this. They gave me a tag of PTSD, and the courts argued during a 3-4 days to try to determine if I had a 5%, a 10%, or a 15% permanent une atteinte permanente, like a permanent damage to my mental situation. And finally, they concluded I was deficient by 5%. So by law, I'm a disabled person by 5% mentally. So that's this sticker they put on you. Which is really interesting because you have an incredibly sharp memory and you are able to articulate these things so well. So that's interesting in and of itself. Okay, but you said, the point I want to get to, because this is really key among many big things you've said, is that
you don't have a pension.
Yeah, I started contributing to my pension the 3rd March of 1988. That was my official hiring date with Canadian Airlines. And technically, by law, again, federal law, they have to send you a report of your pension, what you're at, what can you expect to get if you decide to leave SOUTENIR. And it's a formal report, and they have to send it annually. They normally send that once a year. You get that in the beginning of January. It doesn't matter if you're retired. It doesn't matter if you're on disability. It doesn't matter if you're an active employee. Everybody that is part of a collective pension plan has to receive. That's legal. They stopped sending those to me in 2017. And then when I called in 2018 and I tried to get information about my pension, because now they were refusing even to talk to me, and because my union wasn't representing me, they weren't inquiring either. I had recorded my last conversation to HR Air Canada in 2019, I called them, asking about my pension again. And I have it on recording. I gave them my employee number, 065417. I gave them my address. I gave them my phone number. I gave them my name. I'm at the same address since 2002. They know where I live. And they said, Mrs. Sproule, I cannot find you in the database. You're not in the Air Canada database. You're not an employee of Air Canada. I'm sorry, I cannot help you. Stop calling us.
So this company that you worked for 27 years, you are not even in their database.
Exactly. And people that left the company with not even sufficient years accumulated to have a pension are still in the Air Canada database.
Okay.
And I'm not.
We're almost out of time, but I want to just touch on a couple more issues. One, you spoke about the union, Unifor. Now, we've already talked about the fact that this husband and wife of these two major unions merged the unions without the members voting on that. And you also mentioned a connection with the Liberal Party. Now, we have very little time left. So
I was at home, so I had nothing else to do but to read. So I would read a lot of jurisprudence. I'd go read on the government's websites. I'd go read on the Unifor website, looking for information, looking for help, reach out, groups, whatever. And then I come across that August 2019, Unifor is having their annual congress at the Château Fairmont. That's Château Frontenac in Quebec City. So it's a really nice place. Guess who's their major guest and speaker? The Liberal Party of Canada and Justin Trudeau.
You said that there was a law revoked in 2015
yes, ma'am,
where unions, charities, and foundations are not subjected to audits.
I always found it odd because I'm not the only person going after Unifor. There's a group called Air Canada SOS, that's Save Our Seniority. They've been mistreating the groups of retirees of Air Canada, and they've been plundering, and I'm not even afraid to say it, Air Canada's been plundering the Air Canada unionized employees pension fund since 2013 because they got the rules changed. But not only that, when Trudeau came in 2015, and I found that by a fluke, I don't even know why I came upon, because I was not looking for that. I came upon that a law had been changed. So I was looking for things, and I come upon, and it says that now charities, foundations, and unions are protected from audits. Why would unions be protected from audits? Who would have an advantage of protecting from financial audits other than criminal organizations?
So you have made a lot of very powerful
yeah, they're going to be displeased with me, and I'm sure they've been hearing, but I'm not afraid anymore because they've hurt and damaged so many people. And just in Montreal, I'm aware of 3 suicides. And I know they were being harassed and there were things happening, maybe not similar to me, but due to the fact that even though there's been suicides, people losing their lives, losing their houses, having to settle and sign non-disclosures because they're about to lose their house and they're going to be homeless, and the union doing nothing, I feel now that I have even a higher responsibility to speak out for these victims because they lost their voice by accepting to sign a non-disclosure. And I'm sorry, because thinking of these women and men that have been destroyed by Air Canada and by my union that was supposed to protect us. I paid almost $30,000 in my entire career, I calculated, in union dues. And I did for what? I needed them once in my life. I did half the job for the union. All they had to do was put in a grievance and make sure that I was protected. protected, and they didn't even do that. So why did I give my union, all through my 27-year career, $30,000 to be discarded like garbage, been treated like less than a human, like an animal? The SPCA would not let this happen to an animal.
So I want to end with 2 points. One is you mentioned that you have reached out to the media, you've reached out to politicians, the media, and it turns out that...
I found out through my ordeal that the Canadian Media Union is Unifor. And that's why all the medias I was trying to get to take our story, not just mine, because the article that I finally got, Émilie Clavel, shout out to you. You're a real journalist, by the way, and don't let anybody tell you otherwise. She answered the phone at Huffington Post in 2018. She took my story. She took it to her legal department. She had to work all the nuts and bolts to make sure that they could not get sued, because when a media
But essentially, nobody else has
took this story.
And so I want to, first of all, acknowledge Lux Media, because
definitely.
They will take any story, they are the consummate truth tellers, right?
They're truly a real concept of media, is Lux Media.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's others out there, but they're so not popular, the small journalists or the small medias, that there's no way for victims to get a voice. We don't have a voice.
Yeah. So if you had something you could request of the audience today, what is the call to action? What is it you would like for people to know or to do?
Unions in Canada are criminal organizations working against workers' rights. They need to be abolished, investigated, and definitely audited. I don't see why a union like Unifor has so much control on the transport industry, onto the media industry, and are so connected politically to the Liberal Party and the NDP that they even would go out of their way to tell members who to vote for and invest our membership money, the money that we pay our union, is helped and given to political parties that are working also against workers' rights.
Now, you had mentioned to me that if anybody wanted to reach out to you, that is a possibility.
I am honored and happy every time a victim calls me for help with their troubles with their union. I'm no expert. I'm not a professional. The only thing I have is my 22 over years working for Unifor. But through my ordeal in the last 13 years, I've become to be really knowledgeable on the CNESST, on the Canadian Human Rights Commission, and also on the CIRB. And the only reason that's the Canadian Relations Board for Work. And they're supposed to be the safeguards in between, make sure the unions do their duty to represent. But even that organization that is supposed to make sure that unions do their job, they don't care. The only thing they care about is the process is respected.
Okay. So if people want to reach out to you, where do they find you?
I'm on Facebook under Sue SPROULE. I'm on Twitter under Sue SPROULE. I reach out to me through Messenger or text or anything. I will help you and tell you what you need to do, because I was fortunate to have other union members and union representatives across Canada reached out to me to try to help me, as Lucille did, as Chris did, as Dan did, as Denis did, as Kim did, as Billy did. And they have been silenced. They're not allowed to speak up because they signed non-disclosure agreements. I didn't. So if I can help you not be screwed over by your union, it will be my pleasure to help you. But you have to keep in mind, if you end up with any trouble with your union, any trouble with your employer, don't go to HR, don't go to the union, don't go to the company. Get yourself a lawyer, send them a legal request that this has to stop. If not, you're going to seek higher things, and this has to be done in writing. You cannot just, it has to be done in writing.
Okay, Sue, I want to thank you very much for your courage, for your time, for sharing your voice, and for giving other people a voice who are in similar situations. You've pointed to a lot of things. My request is that the mainstream media, anyone within the mainstream media, pick this up, because there are so many incidents here of corruption, collusion. There is a lot to unpack here, and we need to start unpacking it together. So I want to thank you very much for joining me. I'm Michelle LEDUC-CATLIN, here today for Lux Media.